Hey, hello there, welcome to this video. From this video, we are going to start with a new module called as arrays. So this is going to be very introductory video on arrays. As we do for all the models, in first video, we just discuss about basic concept of that model. And in the upcoming videos, we are going to see details about the arrays topic. So let's quickly get started. Let's first understand what is this array and why the C++ provides us with this concept called as an array. Okay. So before discussing about the array, let me revise one small concept with you. See, in order to store some data in C++, if we have to store any kind of data in C++, what we usually do is we create variables, okay? So we have seen that if we have to store any data, we have to create variables. And this is not just limited with C++, this is true with all the programming languages. You go to any programming language, if you want to store some data, you will create variables, and in those variables you will store the data, you will store the values. Okay, now the question arises over here. Let's say I have hundreds of values. Okay, let's say I have marks of 100 subjects. Okay, ideally no students is going to appear for exam where you're going to have 100 subjects, but let's assume that you have an exam and in that exam you have 100 subjects. Okay, and then after giving that exam you will be getting a scorecard, and in that scorecard you will be getting marks of the 100 subjects. Okay, so basically we have a data, and in that data we have 100 marks, so we have 100 different values. Now when it comes to programming, when it comes to C++, the question that arises is how you're going to store these 100 values. Okay, think about it. Okay, if I give you 100 values, how you're going to store it? Now the obvious answer to this question is create 100 variables. Okay, so that can be the answer, right? You can say that we can create 100 variables to store 100 marks, or marks of 100 subjects. um, that is still fine, I'll say. Like if you just have 100 values, then you can go on creating 100 variables. I know it's very difficult job. You can't It's very difficult job to create 100 variables, but it is still feasible. Okay, but let's say if I give you 1 lakh values, okay, then what you will do? How you will store them? Can you create 1 lakh variables? Can you write 1 lakh lines to create variables? And the another question is what you will name them. Like what will be the naming convention of your variables if you have to create 1 lakh variables, right? So if you have huge amount of data, then storing them in variables is not that much helpful. Okay, or it's not a good practice, I'll say. If you have huge amount of data, then the solution to store that data is arrays. Okay, so always remember, if you have small data, like if you have 2-3 values, then you can create variables and store those values in the variables. But if you have huge amount of data, then you can store that data into an array. Okay, so that's it. Like that's it about an array. So what is an array? Array is a storage mechanism which is provided by C++ to store a huge amount of data. Now there is one small important thing in this. See, data, when I talk about data, data can be anything. Okay, data can be, as we have discussed in very early videos, we have seen what can be called as a data. So data is a vast term, but let's talk about two important terms over here about the data. See, data can be categorized into two types. First type is called as homogeneous data, and second type is called as heterogeneous data. Now let me tell you what is this homogeneous data. See, whenever the values that you have, okay, whenever the values that you have, if all the values are of same type, then they are called as homogeneous data. So let's take one example. Let's say you have values like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Then all these values are numbers, all these values are integers. Okay, so we can say that these values, or this data is a homogeneous data. Okay, and there is another term which is called as heterogeneous data. So it is like opposite of homogeneous data. So whenever you have multiple values and all those values are of different type, maybe some of them can be of same type, but not all of them are of same type, then in that case such data is called as heterogeneous data. I'll give you one example. Let's say you have 4-5 values. Let's say 10, 20, then small a, then hello world, this string. So in this case, this data can be called as a heterogeneous data, because in this case you have two values 10 and 20 which are integers, and you have one value small a which is a character, and then you have another value which is hello world, this is a string. Okay, So all these values are of different data types, and that's why we can call this data as heterogeneous data. So I hope you understood what is homogeneous data and what is heterogeneous. Let me quickly revise it to you. Homogeneous data means all the values are going to be of same data type, and heterogeneous data means all the values or some of the values can be of different data type. Okay, now when I talk about arrays, when I talk about storing data into an array, C++ arrays only provide storage of homogeneous data. Okay, so whenever you are going to create an array to store some data, and we are going to see how we can create an array, how we can store data into an array in upcoming videos, but right now just remember this concept. Whenever you want to store any data into an array, you can just store homogeneous data into it. So if you have data of this type like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, like all integers, all characters, all strings, then such kind of data can be stored into an array. But if you have some heterogeneous data, if you have data like which contains different data type values, then such kind of data cannot be stored with an array. Okay, now to store heterogeneous data, we have some solutions in C++ which we are going to discuss in upcoming modules, but in this module we are just going to focus on homogeneous data. So homogeneous data is very important in this module. We are just going to store homogeneous data in an array because C++ array supports only homogeneous data storage. Now there are some programming languages like Python, JavaScript. These languages also support storage of heterogeneous data into their arrays. Okay, but as we are learning C++, it doesn't allow storage of heterogeneous data into an array. I hope you are clear with this point. Now, in what scenarios you should use an array? So whenever you have some homogeneous data, whenever you have some huge amount of data or considerable amount of data, and you don't want to create different variables for them, and the data is associated with each other, then such kind of data can be stored in the array. Okay, I'll give you some example. Let's just look at my screen. See, I have two small examples in front of you. The first example is about marks of 5 subjects of a student. Okay, now whenever you talk about marks, they're going to be numbers. Okay, maybe they're going to be integers or some floating point numbers. So these values are always going to be of same type. Either they're going to be integers or they're going to be floating values. Then we can store such kind of data into an array. Okay, because these values are related with each other. If you observe very carefully, if I talk about marks of 5 subjects of a student, then all these values represent marks of a same student. So these values are related with each other. So in such scenario, it is very ideal to store that data into an array. Okay, I hope you are clear with this small example that I just gave you. Then there is another example. See, I'm going to tell you one small concept, one more small concept, but before that, just focus on this example. You can store data in this format as well. Let's say you want to store marks of 5 different students in 5 different subjects. Let's say the columns represent subject and let's say the row represents student. Okay, so basically this is student 1, this row belongs to, let's say, student 1. So this is student 1, this is mark of subject 1 for student 1, this is mark of subject 2 for student 1, this is mark of subject 2 for student 1, and so on. Okay, so basically this is like a table. Okay, so you want to store data of 5 different students for 5 different subjects, then you can do that as well with the help of an array. Okay, now here comes one interesting concept that we have in C++. Whenever we talk about array in C++, C++ arrays can be categorized into two types. The first type of an array of a C++ array is called as single dimension array, and the second type of C++ array is called as multi-dimensional array. Okay, see, we have array, but they can be categorized into two types: single dimensional array and multi-dimensional array. Now in single dimensional array, you can store the information, and in multi-dimensional arrays as well you can store the information. I'll explain this to you on the whiteboard so that you will understand this very carefully. See, multi-dimensional arrays can be further classified into 2D array, 3D array, 4D array, and so on. Okay, so we can have multiple multi-dimensional arrays like 2D, 3D, and 4D, and so on. I'll explain you how they are going to work, but right now focus on the whiteboard. Let me just go to the whiteboard. Okay, now this thing over here, see this part or this array that I have created, is a single dimensional array. Why it is single dimensional array? Because it has only one row, and in that single row we have multiple columns. So whenever you have this kind of structure, it is called as single dimensional or one dimensional array, 1D array or single dimensional array. We have only one row, and then in that row we have multiple columns. This is one dimensional array. Now this array over here, you can see this array is two dimensional array. Why it is two dimensional array? Because it has multiple rows plus it has multiple columns. Okay, that's why it is called as two dimensional array. So whenever your array looks like a table, it is called as two dimensional array. Whenever your array is going to have more than one row, it is called as two dimensional array. Whenever your array has only one row and multiple columns, it is going to be called as one dimensional array. Now as we have one dimensional and two dimensional array, we also have three dimensional array, four dimensional array. So let me quickly explain how the three dimensional array is going to be look like. Okay, see, this two dimensional array comes under multi-dimensional array category. So this is like a multi-dimensional array. Okay, so one dimensional array is a single dimension array because we have only one row. It's a single dimension, it's very flat. Even two dimensional array is kind of flat, it has multiple rows and multiple columns. Now the three dimensional array is not going to be flat, it is going to be multi-dimensional, but it is not going to be flat in structure. Let me show you how the three dimensional array is going to be look like. This is just like a visualization of an array. We are going to discuss how these arrays get storage in the memory in upcoming videos, but this is like just a small visualization. Okay, now this is how a three dimensional array looks like. You can see it's like a cubical structure. Okay, you can see there are like multiple layers in this. So just consider this layer over here, the layer which is present in the back, this part. So it's like we are taking multiple two-dimensional arrays and we are keeping them one after another, and it's creating cube-like structure. So in which scenario this array can be helpful? So I have given one example over here. See, this array can be used to store marks of 5 students in 5 subjects from 3 divisions. Okay, let me tell you how it is going to work. Let's consider this slice of this cube, like the last two-dimensional array of this cube. So in that two-dimensional array, we are going to have 5 columns and 5 rows. Okay, so that array is going to store marks of 5 students in 5 subjects. So that is the last piece in this, like this slice. There are, let's assume that there are 3 divisions, A, B and C. And if you want to store marks of 5 students in these 3 divisions, let's assume that in every division we have 5 students, then this is how you can store it with the help of 3-dimensional array. See, each layer of this 3-dimensional array is going to represent one division. Let's say last layer represents A division, the middle layer represents B division, and the front layer represents C division. Okay, now each slice or each part of this 3-dimensional array is a 2-dimensional array in itself. And as we have seen, in one 2-dimensional array you have columns and rows. So in row you can store a mark of a student, and there are 5 columns, so you can store mark of 5 subjects. Okay, and similarly you have 5 rows, so you can store 5 students marks in 5 subjects. So in this way the 3-dimensional array is going to help you to store homogeneous data. So these are the scenarios where you can use the 3-dimensional array. So I hope you have understood what is 1-dimensional array, what is 2-dimensional array, where we can use 1-dimensional array, and in what scenarios we can use 2-dimensional array. See, in upcoming videos, whenever we are going to start coding exercises, we will be using these arrays, and in those videos you will get more idea about when to use what array and how to create them. Okay, right now let's not worry too much about their syntax and when to use them. I hope you will understand it gradually. Okay, now let's do a small revision of what we have discussed so far. See, what is an array? Array are used for storage of homogeneous data. Okay, when to use an array? Whenever we need to store huge amount of homogeneous data, then we can use an array. Okay, and what are the different types of arrays that we have? We have single dimensional array, where we have only one array, which is 1-dimensional array, and then we have multi-dimensional array. So all the arrays like 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D arrays are under multi-dimensional array category. Now always remember, as a programmer, as a medium intermediate programmer as well, we are not going to use, or we never use 4D, 5D arrays. Okay, or I'll say even we don't use 3D arrays very often. Okay, so for this course we are not going to go till 4D 5D arrays. We are just going to keep our discussion till 3D arrays. So don't worry about 4D and 5D arrays, like they're very advanced concept and no one is going to ask you question on that in the interviews. So we are going to keep our discussion limited to 2D and 3D array. So in multi-dimensional category, we can consider that we have only two arrays, two types of array, 2D and 3D. Okay, so I hope this video was informative for you, and I hope you understood all the things that we covered in this video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and keep watching this model, because this model is very important from the coding perspective. See, whenever you will go to interviews, you will face lots of questions on this model, because on arrays there can be many problem statement which can be created by the interviewers, and this topic is very important from the technical interview perspective. That's why don't skip this model, understand all the concepts very thoroughly. Thank you so much.